It's a big part of the reason why I love the internet, because it is so much more democratic. The gates have been opened, so not only is it so much easier to find information about, suppliers, outlets, and to connect to consumers, but, we can also, and this is what I love about social media, is that everyone now can express their idea of beauty, and the people vote with their attention, and then ultimately they vote with their money. And so I think that social media has really expanded the idea of beauty for the better.
Veronica Webb is an international treasure and fashion legend. Not only was she the first Black model to land a contract with a major cosmetics brand, she's a supermodel, an actress, and brilliant writer. And seriously, one of the most genius and inspirational people that I've ever met. In this week's episode, I had an opportunity to talk with her about all things fashion, her relationship with the late Azzedine Alaïa, life, aging, and the importance of diversity in the fashion industry. You can check out all of her fashion, beauty, and lifestyle content at webonthefly.com. I felt so inspired after our conversation, and I hope you will too. Thank you so much for coming on A Fashion Moment. I absolutely love your work, your story, all of the amazing things you're doing, and just who you are as a person. Just so brilliant. So thank you for coming.
You're so kind. Thank you.
And I get inspired every time. So I'm really excited to, bring the listeners on in to your journey. So, just starting from the beginning, you grew up in Detroit. I mention all the time, there's so much creative talent coming from Detroit and still coming from Detroit. What was it like growing up for you there? You were into all kinds of things, it seems like.
Well, Detroit was an amazing place to grow up, one, because it was an economic powerhouse for Black Americans. It was one of the most fortunate places that people could land after the Great Migration. My father came up from Columbus, Georgia, and had actually worked for Henry Ford in a Model A and a Model T factory, believe it or not. And my mother's family, her family didn't come. She was the only one who came. They migrated first from Louisville, Kentucky, then to Ohio. And then my mother, after serving in the Second World War, where she was among the first generation of commissioned Black female officers, and my mother retired with the rank of lieutenant colonel, she settled in Detroit after the Korean War, where she met my father. And people used to say when I was coming up that Detroit was a poor man's paradise, because there was work available in every imaginable kind of factory, whether it was, Hitsville, the hit factory of Motown, to the Stroh's Brewery, to, the big three auto plants, to places that made potato chips. And the factories were all glass. It was almost like a Mac store. So you always saw people working, creating, and people who were both economically and socially mobile, which was a really empowering way for me to grow up. And then my sisters went to Cass, and they were in the same class. They were a couple years behind Diana Ross, who had recently graduated from Cass. And then Tracy Reese is also very close in age to me, and she went to Cass, where my sisters went as well. I had the incredible privilege of having a mother who was both very left brain and very right brain. And so my mother was an emergency room nurse. She ran the emergency room at Detroit General Hospital, but she was also incredibly creative. So my mother like loved fashion and made all of our clothes, and we all sewed clothes, dyed our shoes, and knitted and spun wool, because my mother grew up, she grew up on a farm during the Depression, so she knew how to do everything. So, it was not unusual that, on a Saturday afternoon, we would do something like sew on a quilt, make a prom dress, and then make soap.
Wow.
From scratch. And it's funny, like, when I read about Martha Stewart, actually, a lot of our upbringings are very similar, because she talks about things that she did with her mother when she was a child, which are very similar to the things that I did with my mother. So that really gave me a huge appreciation of quality of craftsmanship, and also style. So by the time I got into the fashion world, and I was lucky enough too that, my mom, anytime we wanted to do something, she would say to us, okay, so how are you going to get started? And, and my parents were always ones for, make a plan. Don't ask when will you, or why, why can't I, or why can't I? Your question is always, how do I get started? How do I take the next step? So, it's kind of like something that Nipsey Hussle also said that was so great. Like, don't worry about building the wall, lay the bricks.
Wow.
And then you'll end up with a wall. So for me, my dream was to do something creative, to go to New York, to live in a creative world. I didn't know exactly how that was going to be, but early on, my parents told me, well, if you can compete for scholarship money for these classes, you're certainly welcome to take as many as you want. And from the time I was about 11 or 12, I was consistently winning scholarships, either in, to places like Parsons or Detroit Community Music School for dance or for the visual arts. So it gave me a validation very early on that, I could have a life as a creative person. And then, so many great people were from Detroit, like the model Monarchy, the model Danielle Luna, who really is the first Black supermodel who was on the cover of British Vogue in the 60s, who lived in Milan. She was kind of the inspiration for the movie Mahogany.
Oh,
so,
yes.
So all of that was like swirling around in my head. And then when I came to New York, I got here on a scholarship to Parsons. And when I started modeling, the first thing that my parents did, and, two really amazing things about them is, one, they had always had, first they were in the Army, and then they worked for the government. So, my mother worked for the city of Detroit. My father worked for the U.S. government as an electrician in the tank division of Chrysler. So these are both people who both always had, regular jobs with paychecks, who, didn't have any entrepreneurial experience, and who both wore a uniform to work every day of their lives, who allowed me, one, to experiment as much as I wanted to with fashion, and gave me an incredible sense of style. And two, when I decided that I wanted to go into modeling, and the chance came along. I was discovered while I was working at a houseware store in Soho as a cashier. My parents, first thing they said to me was, one, now you own your own business. We're not going to be your partners in this. We were going to be your partners in your education. But now that you're not going to school, you need to pay us back for the money that, we forfeited because you're out of your second semester of school. And then the best business advice my mom ever gave me was, she said, you're not going to have a pension and you don't know what your future is going to hold. So you need to start investing and set up a 401k.
Wow.
Which I did with my first paycheck when I was 19. My first paycheck from modeling. And, so that was kind of my foundation, always like, being creatively expressive, but keeping an eye on the bottom line.
How did you find the scholarships? Were you like proactively asking? Were you researching? Like, how did you find the money at such a young age? I know we have the internet now.
Well, you need mentors, and it's really important to have mentors. And that's why, to this day, I continue to mentor young women, both educationally and in the fashion business, because, if it weren't for teachers who really believed in me, and teachers who understood, as my great friend Anna, it's so hard for me to say her last name, but one of my great friends, Anna, always says that wanting is power, and when you want something bad enough, it gives you the power to find it. And education was so deeply prioritized in my family that was my focus. And everything really is a question of focus, because even if you can't hit the goal that you originally think that, you're after, the thing that is right for you and the thing that is a fit for you will appear if you work in that direction.
Mm. So how do you keep the distractions at bay? Because, life can be crazy and, you get the curveballs, or, you get, the health issue, or you get the work issue. Like, how do you stay focused in the midst of chaos? What are some of the things you do?
I really have no idea. And that's,
I know that question came out of nowhere,
right?
But I'm asking personally
it's
as well.
Not even that. It's not even that, but you know what? I think especially like once, our lives expand and they get even bigger, and we add children and we add marriages and mortgages and, all the things that come with adulting. There's so many distractions, and there's so many things that, take priority because, family first.
Yes.
And I tend to be really hard on myself. So whenever I get off track, I'm sure that, I failed. The ship is going down.
Yeah.
I'm no longer a leader.
Yeah. Yes, I completely align with that quite often. So I'm like, what does Veronica do? What can I implement now? Especially having young children, and, I'm currently going through a divorce. So there's like a lot happening. So I'm like, okay, how can I stay focused on these areas? So, just meditation and yoga, doing what I can.
Well, I think those things help a lot. I think, there's some basic things that we all need to do. One of which is there's no pride in self-neglect, because often as mothers, the message we get is, oh, you're such a good mom, or you're such a good wife because you didn't take time to eat. You're such a good mom, or you're such a good wife because you haven't had a shower in a week. That's not healthy, and that's not a healthy example for your children. And I think, the one thing is like, always try to conquer your basics, right? Like, get up, make your bed, pick up after yourself, just do the basics where you feel decent. You don't have to go above and beyond, but, just make sure that, you do the basics. And then for me, I have to make lists. So I'll make one list that, and it says kids. And then the next list says, money. And then break the money down into categories. So, the money is business, personal, household, right? And so then, and then break it down and Post-it tell. And you can basically, make the same kind of Post-its with labels, and you just pull them out every month. And then twice a month, like on the 1st and the 15th, I go through all the accounting, and I try to put everything in different files so that, taxes don't crash down on me, so that, everything kind of stays the same. And then half an hour a day. And even if it's like while I'm folding laundry, I'm stretching, or while I'm watching TV, I'm stretching, or if at night when I can't sleep, I'm stretching. Just try to get the tension out of your body, because that's the killer, especially, for African Americans and Latin women, hypertension is so hard on us, and it's the silent killer. And, the number one cause of early mortality for women right now is heart attack, because we have so much hypertension, and the symptoms of heart attack in women aren't that studied. So just really, really, really try to make sure that you keep the tension out of your body, and try to, and 1 day a week, treat your body like a baby. So don't give yourself anything that you wouldn't give to a baby.
Wow. Love that. Noted. You know what? I need an online course, Veronica. Like I don't know if you offer like mentorship services, but like the young ladies, like we all need to learn these things. Very important. But you know what? I'm going to take it back to the fashion. You walked in Chanel. What was it like walking in your first Chanel show?
For me, at any time, I have a job, as much as I love it, it's equally as frightening and as nerve-wracking. And I want to tell you why. It's because I really care, and I want things to go well. And there's always a chance that either it's going to turn out really great, or there's going to be a complete disaster. I mean, I've been in Chanel shows where the glue on my shoes hadn't dried yet, because the shoes had just been delivered from the factory, and the heels came off on the runway, and I fell
Oh my God.
on Anna Wintour.
No. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And there was no one who was more perfect or more demanding of themselves than Karl Lagerfeld. So, to make any kind of mistake in the court of King Karl was always mortifying. But, for as larger than life and as monumental as he was, I mean, like sometimes Karl would just seem so accomplished, and just his knowledge was so vast. You almost need to go see a shrink afterwards because you felt so inferior. He was always the most kind, encouraging person. He really was.
Wow. Well, some models are, or people sometimes think that models are catty. Like, were there other models that sort of became your friends and colleagues over the years? Like, was there a sisterhood that you created among certain models? Like, how did that go for you?
Yeah. I mean, listen, in any job where people are compared to one another on things that they don't necessarily have that much control over. Like, there's no way I can make my legs longer, or, my skin another color, or, there's just, a million arbitrary things that a client is looking for. And when people start comparing themselves to one another, that brings out the worst in people. It always does. So, there's an element of that. And then also because, modeling is based on youth, and most careers are very, very short. Like, the average career is 3 to 5 years. And most people don't really get rich from modeling. Like, maybe they can pay down some of their debts, and they meet some people, and they have, a nice start in life, and they have a few pictures to take with them. But most people don't get rich from modeling.
Wow.
And so because it's so short and the turnover is so high, and someone who looks like you is usually coming in behind you to replace you, yes, it can bring out the worst in people. On the other hand, you have this incredible group of women from all over the world with, backgrounds that you have never even heard about or learned about, names you can't even pronounce, who come from places that you can't even visualize on the map, whose lives are so rich and so varied, and who are so energetic and creative and love fashion so much, that you get this really interesting tribe of friends who open the world up to you, and who, like, Marpessa Hennick, I'm friends with till this day, Carla Bruni, Cara Young, Karen Alexander, Linda Spearing.
Wow.
I mean, Iman, Naomi, I could go on and on. So, and that's a very rich, special part of my life that because it's so rarefied, we only shared as a group of models. So it's a little, so it's like, in a way, your family, where, I always say that, my sisters now are the only ones among my friends who, because, I moved away from Detroit and I don't have any friends from Detroit except for one who lives here. But, it's kind of like only my sisters remembered the times when both my parents are alive and all my aunts and uncles were alive and all the different places that we went together, and increasingly now, my group of models, we're the ones, only among us do we remember the times when Azzedine was alive and Carl was alive and Patrick Kelly was alive.
Ah, Patrick. And, yes. Wow. What an icon.
So, yes. Yeah. So, it's like a little family for sure.
I love it. And you mentioned Azzedine Alaïa. Like, what were some of the key lessons that you learned from him and just like life in Paris? I mean, you lived with him and he taught you so much. What was that experience like? What do you remember about him?
Oh, I remember everything about him. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about Azzedine. He was one of the kindest people that I ever met, one of the most empathetic people I ever met. And Azzedine and his partner, Christophe, who they met on the first day of, Azzedine met his partner, Christophe, on his first day of art school.
Wow.
When he was 19 years old.
Wow.
And, they stayed together for 50 something years. And I still talk to Christophe on Sundays, because I consider him to be really like a father figure in my life. But one of the biggest things that Azzedine taught me, and it echoes very much something that my mother taught me, was learn how to learn, because the world is changing faster and faster and faster.
Wow. Wow.
As you know, he was incredibly generous and always had people at his table, and would never let someone who he cared about go hungry. And, he told me the story of when he was a kid, there was a neighbor who had lost his wife, and he couldn't take care of the daughter that he had. And so one day he was sitting at the dinner table. He was about 5 or 6 years old, and his mother sat the girl down next to his grandmother sat the little girl down next to him and took half the food off of Azzedine's plate and gave it to her because they were the two smallest children.
Wow. Wow.
And he got really upset and he threw a fit. And his grandmother took his food away, and she said, "This could easily be you one day with no food and no one to give you any food."
Wow.
And, he never forgot that, he told me. And that girl who grew up with him became like a sister and stayed with his mother. She never married and stayed with Azzedine's mother and his grandmother till the very, very, very end of their lives.
Wow. Wow. Oh, I have chills. That's amazing.
So, really is that, when you have good fortune, share it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Take care of the people who you love.
I love it. I love it. So, we got to talk about the runway. We got to talk about runway. How did you how did you refine your walk? Because you have a walk, you have a walk that is like specific to you. Was it just something that came naturally? Did you have a coach? Did you practice?
Well, I took ballet when I was young. I think dance or athletics is one of the most important things that you can do for any young person, because it really sets the framework of your body for the rest of your life. I was hopeless at walking in high heels in the beginning. And, and if you want to be good at anything, you have to practice it, and you have to be able, my sister's a doctor, right? So when she was an intern, and she would be on for 36 hours and then off for 18 hours and on for 36 hours and then off for 24 hours. And, woken up at all times of the day or night to perform all types of procedures. What I kind of got from her there, and the discipline that I took from ballet, is that you have to continue to practice things even when you're uncomfortable or it's inconvenient. And if you want to be a good runway model or a good model for that, for that matter, you need to learn how to do everything you need to do in high heels. You need to learn how to walk, run, jump, shop, travel, get in and out of a car in high heels. And as a young girl, of course, that's not a skill that you've practiced for a long time, obviously, because, you're not wearing high heels on the monkey bars.
Were you running in high heels, Veronica? Were you like running around the track or the neighborhood in the heels?
You have to like point shoes. You have to build up a tolerance. So, I would take one day a week when I was still learning how to wear high heels and how to model. And I would do, not run around the track, obviously not, because that's stupid. You'd ruin your feet and kill your back. But I would take one day a week where I would do all my errands in heels.
Love it. Love it. Well, you were the first Black supermodel, model period, to land an exclusive contract with a major cosmetics company. So what was that process like for you? And, what ran through your mind when you actually saw the ad campaign? How did that happen?
Well, everything takes a village, right? So one of the things was that, like I said, I grew up in Detroit, which was this real economic powerhouse for African Americans. And going back to Madam C.J. Walker and then through the time of Revlon, as consumers, we had continued to build our economic power. And, it never would have happened without one, amazing people in the fashion industry who helped me and believed in me, like Elizabeth Salzman, who's a stylist and an editor, the supportive people like Anna Winter and Franca Sizzani publishing my pictures in Vogue, and then help from designers like Azzedine Alaïa and Karl Lagerfeld and Isaac Mizrahi. And then, I always have to give a shout out to the most important person who made this happen, which is a woman named Jerry Bacchus Glover, who's a cosmetic chemist. And, Jerry is a Black woman, and I think one of the very first people to really have a really high position at a corporate level at a mainstream company where she made color style happen. And that was really her baby from soup to nuts. So it was amazing when it happened. I mean, it was a huge responsibility because, being from a generation, a family who has a lot of firsts, my mother being one of the first commissioned Black officers in the U.S. Army. My sister is the first Black female oncologist in the state of Michigan. My sister Teresa is among the first teachers to help design math curriculums for Title I schools. So, I really understood how important it is to be, one, to get your foot in the door, but then two, you have to pave the way and create opportunity. And, it was amazing to have that ad, but at the same time, on that first set, there were no people of color. The way they made me look was I hated my hair. I hated my makeup. It was awful. And, I really had to stick my neck out and make a huge fuss and say, hey, nothing about this looks right. Nothing about this is right. We need to get, we need to get the right people who are both ethnically sensitive and how can I put this, who are both ethnically sensitive and also deeply connected to the aesthetics and the beauty of our community. And I was able to bring in Sam Fine and Oscar James.
Wonderful. Oh, thank goodness. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah. And if you look at the first ads, and then if you look at the later ads that Sam and Oscar did, it's night and day. But what was really nice was then, it started to create opportunity all up and down the supply chain. So, I would ask, well, are you dealing with African American trucking companies? Are you dealing with African American suppliers on the chemical side? Could we get a caterer? Could we get, a studio assistant?
Wow. It just trickles down.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And, you were there, in the earlier phases of that change. Like, what are your thoughts now on the diversity in the industry and the inroads that are being made today?
It's a big part of the reason why I love the internet, because it is so much more democratic. The gates have been opened. So not only is it so much easier to find information about, suppliers, outlets, and to connect to consumers, but, we can also, and this is what I love about social media, is that everyone now can express their idea of beauty, and the people vote with their attention. And then ultimately they vote with their money. And so I think that social media has really expanded the idea of beauty for the better. I think that, we're seeing so many categories of beauty for us, by us. There's a great organization where I was one of the founding members called 25 Black Women in Beauty. It's BWV_25. And if you have any questions about the beauty industry, getting into the beauty industry, if you're looking to be mentored, or, would like to expose your product or idea to a forum of really highly competent women in the cosmetics industry, look it up. So, that was something back in the day that was unheard of, which now, we have an international network where we can tap into it at the end of our fingertips.
Oh, it's wild. It's wild. And you just recently joined a board as well, right? The Black in Fashion.
Black in Fashion Council, started by the lovely, amazing Lindsay Peoples-Wagner, who was the youngest editor-in-chief ever at Condé Nast. She was the editor of Teen Vogue after Elaine Welteroth left.
Yes.
Who's now on the talk, the fabulous Elaine Welteroth.
Fabulous. We love Elaine.
Yeah. So Lindsay is now at the cut, but in response to a lot of the things that happened last summer and the incredible opening and awakening of the beauty and fashion industry to create more opportunity, the Black in Fashion Council was created as a mentoring organization, one, to prepare people for the opportunities that had now presented themselves. Because, if you don't have someone who can explain to you what you need to do in order to get to present your business at an entry level to somewhere in mass market or prestige market, it can sink your business.
Wow.
And if you have an idea and you don't necessarily know how to get the education, or you don't know that hiring is coming up in a certain company, because passion is very much a tribe. It's like Wall Street. It's very much word of mouth. If somebody doesn't tell you or recommend you for these jobs that are coming up, you may not necessarily know. So Black in Fashion Council exists for that. And then on the other hand, education goes both ways. Like, I'm never angry when someone says something that may be off color or doesn't sound right if they don't understand, if no one ever told them that that's not right. Yeah. Because, I've put my foot in my mouth and stepped in shit a million times, coming from the east side of Detroit and being exposed to a world audience and being exposed to all kinds of different races, religions, cultures, orientations, preferences, lots of things where, something as simple as even, I didn't know that you're not supposed to shake a rabbi's hand.
Oh, yeah. Wow. There's so much.
And so, And so there's so many things that, people don't know on both sides. So one of the great things that Black and Fashion Council is doing is, we've partnered with the Human Rights Organization in order for companies to be able to have listening sessions, in order for people who are in HR who may have not necessarily have grown up with somebody who's, Black or Indian or Asian or Latin, or the other way around, who may not have a lot of exposure to white people, to be able to sit down and talk to someone and say, hey, I'm coming up against this and I don't know why. What should we do in our country, our company?
Love that.
To rectify this? Or what can I do as an individual in order to rectify this? And then, treating people as equals from the day that they come in. And if you have questions, you have questions. So it's kind of like removing the gotcha politics.
Yes. Wow.
That's one of the big things that the Black and Fashion Council is doing. And I'm really incredibly proud of what Lindsay People-Wagner and Sandrine Charles, her partner, who runs a PR firm by the same name, Sandrine Charles, have been able to do.
Oh, that's beautiful.
In just a year, there's over 150 major brands that have signed on.
Amazing. We had to do something, just as a fashion community, something had to be done. And obviously something had to be done broader, more broadly, as it relates to who we are as a nation. So I'm glad that, there's so many changes and shifts happening. It's really great for our future, I think.
And I just have to give a shout out to Sandra Richards over at Morgan Stanley, who has been an incredible supporter of us at Black and Fashion Council.
Amazing. Wow. All right. That's great. That is amazing. Love it. Love it. Love it. So, I have to get into Webb on the Fly. What is Webb on the Fly, and what was your inspiration to launch Webb on the Fly?
Webb on the Fly is my blog. It is a pro-aging blog, and my motto is own your age, own your beauty, own your power. And I started it when I turned 50 because 6 years ago, the conversation about diversity isn't what it is now. And the conversation about age, which is really just beginning in fashion and also more broadly in pop culture, is only beginning now. I think that, women are seen as invisible or interchangeable once we get over 40. I think we live in a culture that, values us really only as sexualized beings. And there's very little information about women as we age, both reproductively and psychologically. And it goes across the board. I mean, even nurses who, I have some of the best doctors in the world, and I have conversations with the nurses, and they tell me that when they went through menopause, they were completely shocked. No one talked about it in medical school. Their mothers didn't talk to them about it, and they're taken by surprise. And it's in many ways seen as a taboo subject, where women feel that, once they start going through menopause, they don't want to talk about it. It's a loss of power. Whereas, I think it's a rite of passage that frees us up and gives us a lot more time for ourselves and a lot more wisdom, because, your body has come in many ways full circle.
Wow. I love that.
And I think it's really important as women that, we stop thinking that our most valuable asset is youth. Because if you're always chasing something that you can never get more of and you can't make more of it, wow, you're like a serpent swallowing its tail. Whereas our strength and our wisdom should be our most valuable asset. And the thing that, that we're always working toward and chasing should be strength.
Wow. I love that.
And through strength comes wisdom, and wisdom is ultimately your power.
So, as someone who, like as women, like, getting all of the, I'm only 35. So I'm like kind of at that mid, like I'm approaching the 40, but, I've been reading a lot and just sort of, being in rooms, with different moms and folks who are in their 40s and 50s. And this comes up quite a bit. What has worked for you just in terms of not allowing society's sort of messaging to permeate your space? Because, there's so much that we're taking in, whether you're at work, whether you're at home, even, so many changes, and to grab a hold of that is really tough. You have all of these ads, saying like, fountain of youth here, anti-aging here. What is sort of your approach to be strong?
I'm not anti-aging. I'm pro-aging, because if I'm not aging, I'm not growing.
Love that. Wow.
So I want to make sure that, I nourish myself in every way possible so that I can grow. So that means, building muscle, building aerobic capacity, and building knowledge about my own health. My journey in menopause has been really interesting. For some people, like, it just kind of, from one day to the next, they don't really feel that much different. For me, I had like a lot of severe symptoms, like, brain fog, night sweats, tingling on the back of my hand. And so this was all things that, I had to find out for myself, because you don't necessarily go through menopause at the same time as your mother or your sisters. And it's different for everyone.
So is it sort of like pregnancy in a way, like where,
Yes.
You can get the most random, like someone's like, oh, I got a wart here, or, I got diastasis recti, and, like just random, obviously like my feet grew like 2 sizes, but, other women that I know, like that didn't happen to them. So is it kind of like that in a way?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And no one talks about it. I'm like, why don't more people talk about these things that happen to women just in different phases of their lives? Like, I think that if the shame, were to be removed, like we could be so much more empowered, as we learn.
Like when you think about it, like every third commercial is for, Viagra, and, you've got like U.S. senators advertising it, where I don't think we've heard a single, we don't see any commercials for anything that has to do with menopause. And we don't see, and we certainly don't see, I think, a lot of prominent women really talking about it in an open way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a taboo I really want to break.
The only thing I probably see often are like ads for Poise, but that's like it. Just in terms of like prominent figures, or, TV ads, or, just, I see a lot of Poise ads, but that's about it. It's wild. Well, we still have a ways to go, but I absolutely love Webb on the Fly. Where can people go to check out your blog?
Well, you can always find me on Instagram, which is at Veronica Webb. And my blog is Webb on the Fly, WEBB, like my last name, webonthefly.com. But we talk about, I talk about so much more. I interview all kinds of interesting people. I share my knowledge of fashion and building wardrobes and clean beauty and fancy beauty. And, different kinds and different kinds of exercise. But, mostly what I really care about is creating a place where people can go to find sustainable resources for their health and beauty.
Love that. Love that. And, I know you've mentioned, a few just during our conversation, but what would you say is the most significant lesson that you've learned over the course of your life and career? Something that is really salient and stands out for you?
The other day I had an 82-year-old Uber driver, and I got in the car and I said to him, "How you doing today?" And he said, "I've never had a bad day."
Wow.
And I said, I got tears in my eyes. And I said, "Thank you for telling me that." And then he said, "Well, I would never want you or anybody else to ever have a bad day."
Wow. Wow. Every day is a good day. Every day.
Right? Right?
Wow. And I had a rough one today, Veronica. I tell you, it was trying, but it's still a good day because we're above ground and we have an opportunity to experience this amazing thing called life. I love it. I love it.
It's true. And and then another one of my favorite quotes too comes from Tupac, where he was saying, I forget who it was. He was saying it to me. He said, "You know what? I got the same 24 hours you got, man."
I love it. I love it. So, I have to ask, we ask all of our guests the same, we close out with the same question on the show. What is your favorite fashion moment of all time? Just one of your favorites. It doesn't have to be the favorite, but one of your favorites, because I know you have several. It can be personal, professional, or both, and why?
I think it's probably the first fashion moment I ever remember. And I was 3 years old, and my mother made me a cotton romper. And it was the Friday that school came. It was the Friday that school was going to be out. It was light blue with white bunnies and orange, that were holding orange carrots. And it had two big pearl buttons on the front, and I was so little that the top of my thighs were still chunky and fat. How babies have fat, chunky thighs.
I love it.
And I went outside on my front lawn in my romper. And I stood there and I felt like on my green grass, and I felt like I owned the world.
Oh, that is so magical. That is so magical. You're 3 years old. 3 years old.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see the two pigtails that came to my shoulders. I can see the white yarn ribbons that were on the end of my pigtails. I can see it now. And I had it all.
Well, thank you so much, Veronica, for being on the show. It is truly, truly an honor to be able to have this conversation with you. And obviously, you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I wish you luck with everything.
Thanks so much for joining me for this week of A Fashion Moment. If you like what you hear, we'd love for you to join our community of listeners and spread the word about the show. We also want to hear from you. Share your favorite fashion moments and dream guests with us by sending an audio clip or email to afashionmomentpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can tag us on Instagram @afashionmoment, and you could be featured on next week's episode. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review and let us know what you think. Until then, see you next time for another fashion moment. Podcast production by Rebecca Rashid and John Taylor Williams. Digital media production by Megan Porras.
This recording carries a Creative Commons 4.0 international license. Thanks to Patrick Patricios for their song, Hot Coffee.